Hello, nerds and nerdettes, and welcome back to the channel where once again we have a new video for you guys. Today we have a new review and we will be covering Monsters by Barry Windsor-Smith. This is a beautiful story and a beautiful edition that we're going to get into in great depth as the video continues on. But a quick reminder that if you guys are interested in any of the books that I've talked about or featured on the channel, to use the channel sponsor, organicpricebooks.com. You can use the discount code STAYNERDY for $2 off your order, or if you're picking up 4 or more books, you can use the code STAYNERDY, ship it together, save yourself 5% on that entire order. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and start this review with details of this specific book and edition. This is an oversized hardcover edition that does have a trim size that is larger than that of a Marvel or DC omnibus, and I do think that lends beautifully to the story and the incredibly detailed art. This is written and drawn by Barry Windsor-Smith, who is a legendary creator in the comic book world. This is published by Fantagraphics with a cover price of $39.99 and a page count of 368 pages. The age rating that I am going to attach to this specific book, because of how dark the subject material is going to be 18 plus. If you are not 18 plus, please do not read this. I do not recommend that at all. One of the cool aspects about this story is it was originally pitched to Marvel by Barry Windsor-Smith to be a Hulk story, and that becomes very apparent the more and more you read. But due to some plagiarism drama involving Bill Mantlo, which we won't get into during this review, he then pulled it back and started shopping it around to other publishers to try and get his story published. This does take place in 1964 and primarily follow the character of Bobby Bailey, who gets recruited into the military and its Prometheus program, which is pretty much a program designed to try and make a super soldier type of soldier that can be weaponized by the government. But unbeknownst to Bobby Bailey and a lot of other characters that you meet along the way, this program has a very, very sinister root and origin, which you learn about the more you read. Now, there is a lot more to this story, a lot more details and layers, which we can get into during the later portions of this video. But let's go ahead and dive into this edition and take a look at some of the art and talk a little bit about the story. And here we are, the masterpiece that is Monsters by Barry Windsor-Smith. As I give you a tour around this specific collected edition, I apologize for the condition of my book. This book has been through a lot, from me moving across the country to a multitude of houses, staying at my mother-in-law's, to now this house. So you see a lot of scrapes and bruises, just know it's been very well loved. But here we are with a cover. We do have an appearance of a monstrous-like character. Who that is, we won't be getting into during this review to kind of keep it spoiler-free, or as spoiler-free as we can. And then here we are with the spine. Very simplistic, once again. This book is not overly designed, which I think lends beautifully to the story. And then here we are where you can see how well loved it is with all the stains, bumps, and bruises. But it is a very beautiful book. One thing I do want to make note of while we are at this wider lens view here is the size comparison to a Marvel omnibus. Here we are with a size comparison. Make note of how large this edition is. This is published by Fantagraphics, and they really put their foot into the design and the size of this book. You have a good inch or two when it comes to the height difference between this Monsters hardcover and a Marvel omnibus. And now I'll actually put the omnibus on the hardcover itself so you can see just how wide it is as well. And now you see, not only does it have about an inch or two on a Marvel omnibus when it comes to height, but also the wideness here, about an inch more per page when it comes to height and width. And I do think that is needed for Barry Windsor-Smith's incredibly detailed artwork that he does throughout this entire story. All right, let's get into this edition here. So we do have some deep red end sheets here. And then we have the title page. And then the, I guess, creators page slash secondary title page. We only have Barry Windsor-Smith on this book. This is a one-man show, and that makes it even more impressive as you read. Just keep that in mind, that this is all from the mind and hand of one man. And then we get into the book with the first page. It's actually a woman writing a letter. You're going to have some handwritten letters as you get into these, so that will kind of make more sense. And then here we are with the official opening of the actual story itself. One thing to pay attention to as I'm flipping through this book, or you're flipping through the book on your own, there is no expense spared when it comes to the page and how much of it is being used for the artwork to tell the story. And I think that is incredible, how much detail he is putting on every single page, in every single panel. He does make sure to give us a white border on each page with each panel. So you do lose a little bit of that art when it comes to art per page, but it does help with no gutter loss. So I do prefer it in this instance, because this is one of those stories where you are really not going to want to miss a single detail. And if you can't notice from just these pages that I'm showing now, Barry Windsor-Smith is very, very detailed with his artwork in this specific story. You can see every single aspect of the background of a character's face, character's skin, his hair, the folds in his uniform, whatever it may be. You can really pick up on it, and it is absolutely awesome. And that's just the penmanship that I'm gushing about currently. The art is one of the aspects of the book that stands out massively, but that is not to say that the story itself does not stand out. Barry Windsor-Smith thinks out a deeply layered story with a multitude of genres and subgenres, and a ever revolving door of characters that come in and out of the story multiple times at multiple points of their life. So you do have some time jumping around when it comes to certain characters and where they are in their life. Not necessarily no time traveling, so don't expect that, but time skips and time jumps to show characters at different points in their lives. And it's not confusing at all. I am a very unintelligent reader, admittedly so. It does take the expertise of a very good writer to really make sure that I don't get lost in the actual timeline that I'm reading. Honestly, the only drawback here, if I had to make a negative comment, would be some of the letter pages. I am one of those illiterate people that exist that really struggles with cursive, and a lot of these letter scenes here that you're kind of seeing right now are really difficult for me to read. So that's the one negative, but it's incredibly immersive and really makes you feel what that character is going through as they are secretly scribbling letters to a certain character, obviously treading very carefully there to avoid some spoilers about certain characters. Another cool aspect about this story is it is told in 3 chapters, and each one of those chapters has immensely different genres and storytelling qualities and traits, jumping from political thriller to social and racial dialogue to more action forward, to even some slice of life and romance elements, just to name a few. And that's truly only scratching the surface. You can really read deeply into this story and find the subtext behind every panel, every scene, and every speech bubble. It's just that deep of a story. Um, with it being that deep of a story, it's also that heavy of a story. The subject material in this specific book has a lot to do with extremely triggering topics, from domestic violence to murder, to war crimes, really all of the most horrible things you can think of take place in this book in some form or fashion. So be very wary of that and very aware of that when jumping into this. This was a book that was recommended to me, and the individual that recommended it told me to take as many breaks as I can to make sure I kind of don't fall into a dark headspace. And that is my recommendation to anybody watching this. Take breaks. It is very wordy. It's very detailed. It's layered. There's a lot to it, but most of all, it's extremely dark. So take breaks if you can and enjoy the ride. Or maybe not enjoy the ride, because it is not a very fun story to read, but it is surely and purely a comic book or graphic novel masterpiece. It's a masterpiece of storytelling, storyboarding, cartooning, really everything. And the minimalist art style that we see here, where there's not even any colors here, and we get so much liveliness and emotion through these pages, and it's truly breathtaking and a work of art. So I do recommend this to everybody of age. It's one of those comics that you really want to read once in your life. If you read it more than once, kudos to you. You must be a glutton for punishment. But it's one of those that you at least should read once, because it is a true epic and cinematic masterpiece that I think we only really experience in comics every couple years or so, if not every 10 years. So really great stuff. Highly recommend it. Obviously, I stayed away from the story quite a bit, because we'll be touching on that when we get back to the actual table and kind of break down the story and its characters. But we can go ahead and head back to that now and talk even more about the story. My reading experience for this specific title was a journey, to say the least. I found myself taking frequent breaks just to find some clarity in my mind, because of just how dark the subject material was in this specific book. And because that subject material is so masterfully written and drawn, I found a cloud kind of forming above my head during each reading session that caused me to have to take a break. And that within itself is pretty admirable, that you can portray those emotions and those scenes to the point that it truly affects the person absorbing or reading the story. Right away at the spine-chilling opening, you know you're in for something dark and cinematic that's going to give you an emotional response the more and more you read. This story typically sits in the genre of a political thriller, and can sometimes even be reminiscent of storylines that we see over at Marvel, following characters like Captain America or Wolverine, or even the Hulk. Those characters and the stories that they typically partake in do have some similarities to the title that we're talking about today. So if you do find yourself being a fan of titles like Weapon X, also by Barry Windsor-Smith, or even Hulk Gray by Jeff Loeb or Tim Sale, or in general like a hero or protagonist with a very traumatic past, then this might be your cup of tea. So once you get past the super soldier and political thriller core that primarily follows Bobby Bailey, you quickly start to realize that the title is really focusing on the Bailey family as a whole, which does consist of Bobby Bailey, who we've already talked about and mentioned when it comes to his involvement in the story and the Prometheus Project. But we also follow his mother, Janet Bailey, who's a very conflicted and layered woman that you're going to quickly learn a lot about as you progress through the story. And then last but not least, we do have Tom Bailey, who is a World War II veteran that is deeply struggling with PTSD when it comes to what he experienced and saw during the war. But not only do we follow the Baileys, we also follow all of the characters that they've interacted with and impacted throughout time. So we are going to be exploring those characters, that roster of characters, not only in the present, the modern day as we're reading it of 1964, but also in the past, which is expertly done by Barry Windsor-Smith and did not confuse me at all while reading. Once you get into the meat and potatoes of the story, you'll quickly start to realize that the title itself is split up into 3 sections, and each one of those sections has its own genre and subgenre. First of which is that political thriller style of story that we start off by following Bobby Bailey, but then explore more so through the lens of the man that recruited Bobby Bailey into the Prometheus Project, which is Sergeant McFarlane. We quickly get ushered into our first subgenre of the story, which is the historical dialogue of the 1960s, due to Sergeant McFarlane being a black man. Second section is more of a mystery, but also a tragic slice of life, with some elements of romance, oddly enough, as we follow Janet Bailey, who once again is Bobby Bailey's mother, and her involvement with a character by the name of Major Powell, and what events follow between those two. And then our third section, which is the climax, you do notice the story take a little bit more of an action tone as the pace of the story is sped up, but you do get a lot of the deep details of the story fleshed out, and start to learn more and more about the sinister roots of those elements. And then you also have a supernatural subgenre that also gets explored during this portion as well. The fleshing out and the exploration of the Prometheus Project and its origin, Tom's time during World War II, and what exactly happened to the Bailey family leading up to the start of the story is dark and twisted, but also pulse-pounding at the same time. And by the time you reach the end of the story, you are more than satisfied. We somehow have a happy ending, but also a not happy ending, and that's a balancing act that Barry Windsor-Smith does perfectly. There's also some ambiguous elements to the ending that leaves you thinking quite a bit when it comes to the story and the characters, but also it leaves you thinking about life in general and what exactly happens after life. And as we get into the art section of this review, I can't think of any way to describe the art style than it being an actual masterpiece. There is so much elegance and rawness to the panels and the art pieces that you're seeing throughout this story, and it works perfectly as the visual representation of the story that we're reading. You'll notice almost immediately when opening this book that the art style pulled very far away from the bombastic nature of the art that we associate most comic books and graphic novels with, and instead leaned heavily into the heavy detailed neo-romanticism style. These panels, when it comes to the figures and the backgrounds, are so heavily detailed to the point you can see the most minute detail. It leaves you feeling so immersed in this story that you're reading to the point that you can smell the snow in the air or hear the trees rustle with a summer breeze. And while reading, you may notice little mistakes when it comes to the art, such as a line overlapping another line, or maybe an area of the panel that's too heavily crosshatched, so some of the details are muddy. I actually find myself really enjoying those little mistakes because I think it really builds up the rawness and the emotional aspect of the art itself, which just contributes that much more into the immersion of the story that we're reading. And I think the choice of keeping the art in black and white and just raw inks is a very successful choice. I think the lack of inclusion of color allows you to pick up on every little detail, and this is one of those stories where when it comes to the art, it does not shy away from any detail. You're going to see every single gruesome, dramatic, traumatic detail in full effect as you're reading. As we approach the rating that I'm about to give this title, I can't help but think that this is proof that comic books and graphic novels can be regarded as that of literature, especially when they're curated by such a legendary creator. The exploration of the red line theory is one that is incredibly thought-provoking, not only while reading, but once you finish the story itself. And I think we all truly crave that, whether we are novel readers, comic readers, whatever it may be, we all want to crave that thought-provoking aspect of a story that leaves us continuing to think about the story once we finish. And even this review and how much I've talked about this book, I've only scratched the surface of all of the details that take place in this specific story. And I think it is truly admirable when you think of one man doing every aspect of this story when it comes to the writing and the art. And it should be regarded and held in the same regard as titles like Watchmen or Incal or Mouse, because it is really, really just that good. So the rating that I am going to give Monsters by Barry Windsor-Smith is going to be the first for the channel, 10 out of 10. And I highly recommend all of you reading this if you have not already, but at least I hope this review has inspired you to read something magnificent today. And that does wrap up today's review. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate each and every one of you guys. If you did enjoy today's review, then think about hitting that thumbs up button. It really means a lot to us here on the channel. And if you'd like to join the community, hit that subscribe button. And if you don't want to miss a video from the channel, then you can ring that bell so notifications are turned on. But thank you so much for watching once again. I appreciate you guys so much. And of course, stay nerdy.